Welcome to the Boxing Gossip channel. Please hit subscribe if you are new. As always, appreciate you guys tuning in. The world is getting ready for Anthony Joshua versus Joseph Parker. Heavyweight boxing, the boxing world really starting to heat up in anticipation of this massive heavyweight unification fight between two unbeaten young heavyweights. But it's not the only noteworthy heavyweight boxing fight taking place on the card. David Price, British Olympian, huge following in the UK, takes on none other than elite heavyweight Alexander Povetkin in a fight that I imagine come the weekend will be being discussed both pre and post fight with almost as much vigour as Parker versus Joshua. Now obviously in the build up for this I've spent most of my energy focusing on the main event, so I haven't really done too much on this fight other than reacting to the news when it was announced. Let's start with David Price. David Price, as you guys know, massive man, must be 6'7", 6'8", huge right hand, kind of orthodox style of boxer. Came up through the ranks, won British title, known as a devastating KO puncher, kind of a sort of classic style, if you like, that he likes to stand off, keep range, throw the 1-2. And then the losses started. The two losses to Tony Thompson, the loss to Erkan Tepe, the loss to Christian Hamer, and the Price that we see today looks like 10% of the man who was taking out guys like Audley Harrison and Sam Sexton back in the day. When we look at David Price now, he looks like a tentative, scared fighter. He's unable to commit to the jab. He simply paws with it, flicks it out, sticks it out, really unable to commit to it. Very tentative with throwing the big right hand. Doesn't want to take too many risks, and we see that punch being thrown far less regularly and far less effectively from David Price. Defensively, it has become clear that Price is a very frail fighter. Not good on the inside, not good when somebody takes the reins away from him, not good when someone forces the pace on him. Clearly not having the most iron chin in the game, and someone who appears to be a low stamina fighter when the going gets tough. If a fighter gets in on Price, works him on the inside, he doesn't look like he knows what he's going to do. He panics. He looks very vulnerable. And I think vulnerable is the key word to describe David Price. David Price undeniably at some stage has some talent. Olympic medalist, big puncher, huge guy, British title winner. This is not a guy without talent, but the vulnerabilities in his game are so established, and the blueprint on how to beat him is so laid down that he's a guy who looks very vulnerable. His stamina is vulnerable, his inside game is vulnerable, his defence is vulnerable, his chin is vulnerable, and even his offence has dropped off to the point where he's now being taken the distance in a competitive fight with a journeyman like Kamil Sokolowski. No disrespect to Sokolowski, but he's someone early career prospects get matched up against. If I had to design a fighter to beat David Price, if I had to draw up the perfect fighter to beat David Price, for me, I would say a peak Alexander Povetkin is not a million miles off exactly the kind of fighter who you would go out of your way to design to fight David Price. Povetkin short, stocky, can box, obviously an Olympic gold medalist, very established amateur pedigree there, but a guy who likes to bring the fight mid-range to inside range. A huge puncher, a guy with an array of devastating one-punch KOs on his resume. A guy with boxing fundamentals who also throws good short punches, looping hooks, uppercuts, etc. Povetkin, a very tough man. Saw the beating he took at the hands of Klitschko, but was able to keep coming on, keep fighting, not allow his chin to be broken, you know, despite being hurt several points in that fight. So, really, for me, Povetkin is almost the best type of fighter to beat David Price. He's going to be low, and he's going to be a lot shorter than Price. He's going to be able to get inside of that jab, and when he does, he's going to have David Price in all sorts of bother on the inside, and he's going to be landing the kind of punches that will either be able to take David Price out or drain him quite quickly. Even if Price is able to land that money punch, and Price has a puncher's chance in any fight, but even if he is able to land that money punch, you know, there's certain fighters who you'd say, you know, if David Price can land that money punch, he'll win the fight. With Povetkin, it's not even that clear. You know, Povetkin is a guy who's shown a very, very good chin. He's never been stopped in his career. Even if Price is able to get that right hand off and land it on Povetkin, which is a huge if, you know, it's hard to see Povetkin being stopped with a single punch. You know, Price is going to need to be able to tee up that punch with a level of regularity for me in order to beat Povetkin. Having said that, I don't think the Alexander Povetkin we see in front of us today is a peak Alexander Povetkin. I actually think it is possible to suggest there is a decline in the calibre of his work in recent years. Povetkin's a small heavyweight. You know, he's going to be very physically small in there compared to David Price. And he's now 38 years old. I believe that's the same age, just as a matter of coincidence, that Lucas Browne was when he put in his old man performance last weekend against Dillian Whyte. Povetkin, he hasn't been the most active. Having said that, he hasn't been inactive to the same extent as Lucas Browne. You know, he fought twice in 2017, only once in 2016, twice in 2015. You know, there's been enough activity there that we can still see Povetkin's well-being to an extent. But perhaps the biggest concern with Povetkin is his last performance against Christian Hamer, a guy who actually beat David Price, as we'll all remember, on a Eubank undercard. It was probably one of Povetkin's lesser performances for many, many years. And some people will say that's because Christian Hamer's an underrated fighter. Some people will say that's because Povetkin's getting on a bit. It's also noteworthy that Povetkin is a fighter who has had performance-enhancing drug controversies in his career. Now, the Povetkin performance-enhancing drug controversies are exactly that, controversial. And I know there are very, very passionate arguments from fans on both sides of the table as to whether or not Povetkin is guilty of anything. Perhaps that's a conversation for another day. But what I will say is, rightly or wrongly, at times, there did appear to be tests where Povetkin seemed to have substances that are now banned in his system. And having come off those substances, you just wonder whether Povetkin is as dangerous as he was, you know, back in 2014, for example, when he was icing Mike Perez, Manuel Char, Carlos Takam, you know, with one-punch knockouts. Now, that may be nothing to do with the performance-enhancing drugs. Maybe he's just older. Maybe the opponents he's been in with have caused him more problems, you know. But it is possible to say that there's a little bit of a decline there with Povetkin. And certainly his last performance against Christian Hamer, for me, he looked a less threatening fighter. He looked like there was less snap and class to his work for me as the Povetkin we saw against Mike Perez or Marius Wack and Carlos Takam and Manuel Char, those sort of guys. Now, Povetkin is a fighter who at times has been vulnerable from the outside. You know, Klitschko, who used his size against Povetkin, was able to win that fight by jabbing and grabbing, you know, using a good jab and move game from distance, and then stifling and holding Povetkin and frustrating him and big manning him on the inside. Price has a frame to do that game. But whilst he has the frame to do that game, I don't think he's got the attributes or the class to do that game. I don't think David Price can move anywhere near as well as Vladimir Klitschko could move in that 2013 fight with Alexander Povetkin. I think Price is quite stiff, robotic, rigid in his movement. There's no flow to it. It's quite predictable. It's quite slow. It's quite heavy and ponderous. I also don't think that David Price will be as adept at closing down the Povetkin inside game as Vladimir Klitschko was. Now, people consider Vladimir Klitschko's performance in that fight to be unsportsmanlike with how he held and how he clinched. And again, I can see some rationale behind that argument. But what I would say is, whether you think it's right or whether you think it's wrong, it was an effective tactic against Povetkin. And I, for one, do not believe that Price, has the composure and has the defensive awareness on the inside to have that level of success at closing Povetkin down. So whilst Price has the size, to implement a sort of long range outside jab, grab strategy against Povetkin, I just don't believe that he's actually got enough technique, enough movement, etc. to be able to implement that game plan. Because you need to be an athletic, snappy fighter to be able to do that. And I don't think Price is that at this stage of his career. So, for me, I find it hard to make too much of a case for David Price here. Because even though David Price has the size, and even though maybe Povetkin isn't a peak Povetkin anymore, we still have to remember that despite Povetkin maybe not being a peak Povetkin, he's gone out and he's pretty much won every single round. Probably did win every single round against Christian Hamer. Now, Christian Hamer is a guy who knocked out David Price. I'm not saying because Christian Hamer knocked out David Price, it means that Alexander Povetkin knocked out David Price. It's not as simple as that. But it's an indication of levels. Hamer didn't win any rounds against Povetkin. Hamer stopped Price. It kind of maybe is an indicator of what kind of level the guys are at. And even on Povetkin's lesser performance, he was completely dominant over Christian Hamer. Whereas, Price was all at sea. So, in terms of styles make fights, I think this is all wrong for David Price. And a guy with weak defence, a weak inside game, and a weak chin is going up against a ferocious punching mid to inside range fighter who's going to be looking to make a very, very big statement on UK soil in order to set up a future pay-per-view super bout with Anthony Joshua. I suspect it doesn't match up well with David Price. Now, whenever you're discussing David Price, you have to caveat it by saying he does have enough power to hurt any man. And look, if Povetkin is starting to fade, if Povetkin is not the same fighter he was when he fought Klitschko 2013, nearly 5 years ago, maybe if Price clips him, something crazy could happen. But Price couldn't clip Kamil Sokolowski. Povetkin is an elite heavyweight. He is a top 5 heavyweight, even at this stage of his career. And as I've said, even if Price does land that big punch, it's not as simple as Povetkin's going to be wiped out. He's shown himself to be a very tough man, very durable man, and a guy who can get hurt and keep coming. So, it's hard to make a case for David Price in this fight. I think it's a bad style matchup for him. I can see why he's taking the fight, because if he wins, the world's his oyster again. People will forget the losses. People will want to see Price Joshua. We could wake up on Sunday morning and be talking about Price Joshua. We really could be. That's the beauty of heavyweight boxing. One punch can change everything. So if Price wins, his life is changed forever. He'll be a rich man when he retires. And he'll have a variety of hugely attractive options to fight for a world title available to him. So I can understand why he's taken a fight. Certainly he must be more attractive than fighting a 6-rounder in some small hall. So, but whilst you can't blame a man for buying a lottery ticket, I've got to predict Alexander Povetkin to win the fight. And I'm unfortunately going to say I've got to predict Alexander Povetkin to win the fight by knockout in the first 6 rounds of this fight. And I wouldn't be totally surprised if Povetkin does what Erkan Tepe did. A roided up Erkan Tepe, but what Povetkin did against if Povetkin does an Erkan Tepe in the sense that he knocks out David Price very, very early in the fight, because Mike Perez is a guy I consider a durable fighter. Povetkin stopped. It was a bad version of Mike Perez, but Mike Perez was stopped inside a round, I think. When he fought Povetkin. Povetkin is the kind of guy who will throw punches with bad intent very, very early. And if they do land on Price, it's hard to see Price eating too many Povetkin punches clean on the chin, and Povetkin's a guy with good technique, good accuracy, etc., etc. Key things to look out for: control of distance. We talk about distance a lot on this channel. You know, if Price gets the jab going early, uses it as a battering ram, keeps Povetkin off him, we've got an interesting fight. I don't think that will happen. But control of distance, if Povetkin is able to walk through Price's jab, get himself up on Price's chest inside the first round, you know the fight's not going to go on for that much longer. I struggle to see an upset here. I'm unaware of anyone seriously picking David Price. Price is a likeable character. I think what I'll end this with is say good luck to Price. It would be great if he did win. It would be a great story. But I fear it's a very, very bad matchup for him. And we're dealing with two big punchers, one very vulnerable individual. Let's hope both men emerge intact and without any damage done. The referee's going to have to be very, very, very mindful of the condition of David Price in this fight. In the David Price-Tony Thompson 2 fight, in the David Price-Christian Hamer fight, Price was hurt on both occasions and ended up eating a lot of punches as he was stopped, you know, as those opponents sort of rallied all over him. I'm not wanting to see Price in a corner letting Povetkin tee off on him, and I think the ref needs to be mindful of health and safety if that does happen. Good luck to David Price. It is a dangerous fight. It is a fight where you could see a bad knockout, and I hope that Price emerges from this fight without too much damage done. I'm predicting a Povetkin knockout win in the first half, and I do see it hard to make a case for any other result. Please leave your comments in the section below. Are you looking forward to this fight? Do you think this fight should be happening? Do you think it will be a good fight, an exciting fight? Can anyone see it going any other way other than a Povetkin stoppage? Let me know your take in the comments section below. If you've enjoyed this content, please hit the thumbs up. Please do subscribe. I will, of course, be doing a post-fight reaction video to this fight, as well as to the main event. So please do subscribe. Joshua Parker prediction went up yesterday, already up on the channel. Please check that out if you haven't done so already. Thanks for tuning in.